Hello everyone, I'm Jordana Van of Ravenlight Holistic Healing and welcome to Osprey as a Spirit Guide. Now I have two Osprey videos, Osprey as a Totem and Osprey as a Spirit Guide. This here is the video that you want if you've never really had an interest in or experiences with Ospreys, but they're suddenly showing up in various ways. If you've always had an interest in Ospreys or a history of experiences with them, you'll want to watch my video Osprey as a Totem, Personality Characteristics and Life Path Challenges instead. And if you're curious about the other videos I've made or learning more about me and how I do what I do, you can visit the video library and the About Me's at my website, which is www.ravenlightholistichealing.com. Before we get started, if you enjoy my work, consider becoming a channel member and receive members-only perks in exchange for your support. Just click Join next to the subscribe button beneath any of my videos to learn about channel membership and how to get started. If you can't see the Join button, which does sometimes happen, my website contains quick, easy directions for making the Join button visible, and you can find a direct link to these directions at the top of the video description. If something in the video really hits you and you feel moved to send a one-time expression of thanks, you can use the brand new Super Thanks button, the little heart with $sign below, to send a one-time donation. And to all of my channel members and subscribers and all of you guys who take the time to share feedback or show your love in other ways, I appreciate you guys so much. So let's begin with a point of clarification, mostly so that you can sound super sophisticated when you share this information with your family, friends, online community, or like me, the spin class you're teaching. I am honestly not sure if I'm helping my students become more fit or just more weird. Anyway, ospreys are often referred to as fish hawks. But while ospreys and raptors such as hawks, eagles, and harriers all belong to the order Accipitriformes, hawks and ospreys belong to different families. So hawks, eagles, and harriers are all part of the family Accipitridae, whereas ospreys are the sole members of the family Pandionidae. So what this means is that technically referring to them as a fish hawk is incorrect. Also, I would thoroughly encourage you to practice those order and family names before attempting to repeat them for a live audience. You're welcome. So let's get started. Because the osprey's primary food source is fish, they breed along lakes, rivers, coastal marshes, and wetlands, choosing high, open places where they can defend their nest from land and air predators. They live high up in the air, but they must enter the water to attain food. And so what we're talking about first and foremost are messages which represent a combination of the qualities associated with air and with water. So with regard to air, at the forefront is anything to do with logic, thought, communication. With water, we're talking about intuition, emotion, imagination. The best way to really understand this air-water combination is to take a detailed look at exactly how the osprey hunts and the adaptations that allow it to do so. So unlike many other raptors which hunt from a perch, ospreys hunt in flight. They soar over areas of shallower water and using their excellent eyesight to spot a suitable fish near the surface, they hover above it, then dive at speeds of up to 77 miles an hour. At the last second before hitting the water, they swing their legs forward and they bend their wings back so their feet hit the water first. Now the osprey's legs are long and sparsely feathered, allowing them to plunge deeply into the water with virtually no resistance. Their toes, which are sharply taloned, drive into the fish and snap shut in 2/100ths of a second. Now, in addition to the cage created by those talons, each foot features these spiny pads called spicules, which have a sandpaper-like texture, and this essentially locks to the fish like Velcro. And each leg is covered with reversed scales which act like barbs to further hold the fish in place as it wiggles. Sometimes the bird submerges itself completely underwater, and then it must use its strong wings to lift itself out and into the air, which is aided by dense, oily plumage that sheds water and nasal valves which close to prevent water from entering the nostrils. Even more impressive, their outer toes are reversible, so they can use them to reposition the fish in flight if necessary, so that it's head first to cut down on drag and therefore be more aerodynamic. When Osprey is around, one of the first things you should be asking yourself is whether some serious self-exploration is in order. With water being the element of emotion and air the element of rational thought, what this would look like is using a logical process to analyze what you're feeling and why. So first, instead of denying your feelings, numbing them into submission, acknowledging them, but just telling yourself you should feel something else, that's a big one, or otherwise avoiding them as they are, feel them in their truth, whether you like what that truth is or not. Osprey often submerges itself in the water. It goes under. Most of us will do anything to avoid going under, feeling those icky, scary things, but it is in doing so that we heal. Now, as you guys always hear me say, to heal, you need to feel. Now, normally I suggest just being in the feelings for as long as you can, as this alone does eventually create a release, usually when you think you can't stand it anymore. But ospreys, as creatures of air and water, advise employing logic as well. So pull out those uncomfortable feelings, feel them, and as you do, ask yourself some really probing questions about them. Dive into those emotional waters, and keep in mind, you aren't going to drown even though it may feel like it. Ospreys have that oiled plumage and nostrils that seal shut specifically to keep this from happening. You can do this. So now that you're diving in, why do you feel the way that you do? Really? Don't accept the easy answers or those excuses, and don't let yourself get distracted. How we feel in any given moment is a reflection of what we believe about ourselves and our lives. So what do you believe? Why? Who taught you that this was true? Or what's happened in your life to confirm it? A lot of times when we do this, what we discover is that we don't have proof that this is how life is. We're just operating off old childhood trauma or programming. Other times we discover that we ourselves have played an active role here, such as when we confirm our belief that we're unworthy of good things by continuing to self-sabotage. Understanding why we believe as we do, and therefore why we feel what we feel, is ultimately what gives us the power to make changes. And because we're talking air here, I always like to recommend some air-related tools such as writing or talking to help. Gemini and Libra, which are two of our air signs, often don't really understand what they're feeling until they put it into words. I have Libra rising. If I'm not talking about it, I'm not really sure what's going on. So thank God I have a really great listener for a husband. So for you guys, as you are engaging in your self-exploration, if Osprey's around, it may really help you to journal, and that's my other preferred method, or to talk it out. So you can do this with a caring partner or a therapist, or you can speak into a voice recorder. I've recommended that for people who don't have someone that they can trust in their lives yet. You can also, as one of my favorite Gemini rising clients loves to do, art it out. So she draws little cartoon strips with stick figures with those speech bubbles above their heads. If all that feeling work isn't something that we personally need to do, Osprey can also signify that we're being guided to help someone else explore their emotional waters. So with the balance of air and water here, you may have been feeling called to help other people approach their emotions rationally, teaching them to understand and interact with their inner environment in conscious ways, rather than being subsumed or victimized by it. This can be a role we play for our friends, but more often than not, when Osprey's around, we're talking a move into some form of professional counseling or healing. And it's critical to keep in mind here that ospreys do occasionally sink their talons into a fish that is too big for them to lift. And if they can't disentangle themselves fast enough, they do drown. If you're going to do this kind of work and keep your health and sanity intact, You absolutely must be able to prevent yourself from becoming entangled with others emotionally, or they will suck you under. Above all else, this means having clear boundaries, sacred rules for your relationship, which you both understand and to which you both adhere. These are for their health and protection as much as yours. I remember being terrified to set boundaries with my clients when I first began my healing and counseling practice years ago, because I thought that they would perceive this as my abandoning them when they needed me most. And I had a long history of abandonment. I was afraid of creating that in other people. So what happened? I became exhausted and sick and resentful and scared, and they just kept wanting more. But when I finally began spelling out exactly what their role was as a client and mine was as the counselor and healer, I was shocked to find that my clients started thanking me for loads of paperwork. Most of them didn't want to take advantage of me. They just didn't know how much they were allowed to ask of me and under what circumstances. It was a great comfort to them to know. And those that did want to take advantage were forced to do for themselves at critical times, which was definitely for their good. So if you are already a counselor or healer and you're feeling the effects of permeable boundaries, it's time to move in the direction of greater firmness and have those hard conversations you've been avoiding. If instead you have shied away from going into healing or counseling work because you aren't able to set boundaries, Osprey is a clear indicator that it's time to learn. Start setting boundaries with friends and loved ones. The way we are with the most demanding among our social and familial circles is a good indicator of how we would behave with our most demanding clients. And you'll eventually be able to set boundaries at a professional level. Just remember that it can take a long time to get there, and that's totally okay. It takes how long it takes. It took me a good 1.5 years of deliberate practice to be able to both set and hold boundaries, and years more before it became second nature. The important part is that you make an effort, and when you fail, that you sit with your emotions and ask why you let those boundaries be violated. You will learn so much about yourself when you do this, and that benefits you and ultimately your clients. Now, because water is the element of creativity and imagination, as well as emotion, Osprey can signify that it's time to immerse ourselves in a creative activity. But because air is involved, this isn't the kind of activity which represents unadulterated emotional flow, but something which also possesses a logical component. So my own writing process is a good example of what this can look like. When I write, I get a whole lot of stuff on paper in my signature chicken scratch, usually stream of consciousness style, and then I spend days organizing and editing. I love editing more honestly than I typically love writing, which can make me want to stab my own pen in my eye. So the part of my creative process in which I am legitimately tuned into flow, into water, is relatively small, just as the Osprey's plunge into water is a comparatively small part of its own process. It spends the bulk of its time hunting in the air. And so Osprey's messages around creativity tend to mean that however our imagination is being manifested, it needs to be heavily augmented by conscious mental consideration. So this could be editing and refining, like my writing process, or it could be careful planning in the first stages. I also make really complicated art quilts, and all the pieces have to fit together just so, or the whole works literally falls apart. So there's a lot of analysis that happens at the front end. This doesn't mean things don't get altered mid-process, but that the process itself couldn't happen without all that planning. Now, if you've been wanting to be more creative, but you just can't seem to drop into that flow you're wanting, start writing down the details of what you'd like to do. This may be just what is needed to kickstart the process, that analytical approach. And if you've been judging yourself for being too analytical as you're creating, kick the self-criticism to the curb. When Osprey's around, you're supposed to bring logic to the party. So let's go back to the way in which Osprey hunts, with those uniquely long legs, spiny feet, and flexible toes. Anytime there's an emphasis on legs, feet, and toes in a creature, we're talking about forward momentum in our life. Our legs and feet and toes literally help carry us forward, and our body loves symbolism and metaphor. So, are we feeling joyful and excited and empowered about the direction in which we are moving? Or are we feeling confused and afraid? Are we actually moving, or do we feel stuck? If we're not feeling as though we're moving towards something we want, Osprey has plenty of advice on how to change that. So first, think about the fact that Osprey's feet are designed in multiple ways to hold on to that slippery, wriggly fish. That fish is how the Osprey nourishes itself physically. And so for you, what is represented is a goal, something that you are hunting, chasing, that would nourish you on a soul level. So how committed are you to that goal? Is it something you are taking seriously, gripping, and which you are pursuing then with devotion? Or are you literally letting it slip through your fingers? If you really, truly want something, Osprey would tell you that you absolutely, absolutely must commit. Make your goal the most important thing in your life and give it all of your focus. And if you can't, ask yourself why. Is this because you don't actually want it? In which case, it's time to let that goal go, no matter how long you've pursued it, and find another that you do feel passionate about achieving. Sometimes the issue here is that we're actually afraid of what would happen if we did get the thing that we wanted. And so we're effectively stalling, in which case it's time to take a deep dive into those emotions and beliefs and ask yourself what is really going on. The Osprey's toes are one of its most significant features, and in metaphysical terms, toes represent details. These are things related to our forward momentum, which we perceive as either helping or hindering our progress. Our big toes are particularly important. When we stub or break our big toes, or when we experience pain here that isn't caused by a medical condition, our bodies try to tell us that we're confused about the direction in our lives, that we're not really sure where we're going. We don't have any idea of the details involved, and so we're floundering. And usually we're blaming ourselves for this issue, sure that it's some failing within us that's causing us to feel so lost. It may also indicate that we think we know where we should be, and we think we know what needs to happen to get us there, but we just can't check the necessary boxes. And here again, we usually think it's our fault. When Osprey appears, if you don't know where you want to be, it's often because deep down you actually do. But you've been unable to let yourself recognize and or honor that desire for a million reasons. First among them, old limiting beliefs about money and security, and a lack of perceived deservedness of a happy life. There may also be self-imposed responsibilities that would have to be surrendered if you were to change track and pursue what you really wanted. Guys, if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing with yourself, that sense of wrongness really doesn't just go away. The pressure will tend to stay with you and will often worsen with time, manifesting as illness or accidents or other unpleasantness. Don't wait for that to happen. Instead, be brave and really contemplate letting yourself pursue a course that scares you as much as it excites you. I always used to tell clients to ask themselves, what do you want but think you can't or shouldn't have? And then to be brutally honest in the answers. Once they did so, they were to fill in the details, elaborating on all the sparkly impossibilities they desired, no matter how impossible. Some of these lists were enormous. Then they had to sit and write down, for each of those things, why they thought they couldn't or shouldn't have what they wanted. Once that was done with each one, they were to sit and feel and to ask themselves questions until they understood exactly why they felt they couldn't or shouldn't, whatever, and could let it go. This could take a while, but it was effective. When you let go of all your reasons why you think you can't or shouldn't have something, and it is something you do actually want, the happy thing either tends to just wander into your life with stunning ease, or you get something else that makes you just as happy. Now, if you do have a goal that's important to you and you're not where you think you should be with it, it's time to take a cue from Osprey and streamline. That was the big thing I got from Osprey when I was working with him. Organize and get rid of anything that's distracting you or slowing you down. Be merciless here. And instead of worrying about details that you fear are insurmountable, dive in and confront them head on. Learn everything you can about them. We tend to ruminate when we're scared instead of investigating the reality. Quit ruminating. And then once you've learned everything, then do what you can about them. And if you can't do anything about them, you need to surrender them. The universe has this incredible way of resolving even the most impossible hurdles. And we have the term miracles in our language for a reason. Miracles do happen. So let them go if you can, and if you can't, feel your fear and frustration and whatever other emotions are attached to them until you can let them go, and just let the universe handle them. Half the time, the stuff that we were so sure we needed to do to get where we wanted to be winds up actually being totally unnecessary. So let's move on to Osprey's relationships. Ospreys are monogamous, mostly. They'll tend to mate and raise chicks with the same partner season after season, though if one partner dies, the survivor will find a new mate. A great deal of the success of an Osprey relationship revolves around food. The male's courtship flight, in fact, involves some pretty fancy flying while carrying nesting material, or just as often, a fish. That fish is a big deal, as females who receive more fish are more receptive to breeding. When she's hungry, she will beg food from him. And if he doesn't provide, she may just hook up with the cute male next door who will. For this reason, it's believed that Osprey males actually protect their paternity by feeding their females. If you're in a relationship, particularly if it's new, Ospreys would signify that it's probably going to demand a great deal of your time and energy, and possibly no small part of your pocketbook. Your partner might seem to be endlessly focused on how much money you're making, your ability to bring home the bacon, so to speak. Or they might make it no secret that they would like to be lavished with gifts or expensive meals. This isn't necessarily a bad sign. If you're going to be the one supporting the family while your partner raises the children, it's only fair that they would want to be reassured that you can handle all the bills. And for some folks, gifts and meals are their love language. They aren't shallow. They just feel most loved when you take the time to select or prepare something meaningful for them. But it may be the case that you are not the kind of person who enjoys being expected to pay for everything or to constantly give gifts. And if that's true, Osprey would strongly suggest that you consider whether or not you like the other person enough to compromise here and give them what they want for the sake of the relationship. Because if you stay in the relationship and don't deliver on these things, you're not only unlikely to get what you want, they may just look for it from someone else. On the other hand, when a male osprey suspects that the eggs in the nest are not his, he will attempt to roll them over the side so that they fall to the ground and are destroyed. There's often a battle once the eggs are laid, as the male tries to push some of them out and the female tries to pull them back, and they have to actually decide together which eggs to accept and nurture. If you're in a relationship and you've considered straying, no matter how justified you think it may be, and Osprey starts showing up, don't. Talk to your partner instead and work things out, or leave. If you have children as a result of an extramarital affair, your partner is unlikely to be even remotely accepting of them. And this is ultimately going to hurt your child most of all. Now, like the majority of bald eagles, ospreys return to the same nest year after year, adding to them until they are positively massive. After a few generations, they can be up to 5 feet in diameter, 2 to 7 feet deep, and weigh over 300 pounds. They're so large, in fact, that smaller birds such as starlings or sparrows often live in the underside of the nest. Osprey often indicates as a result that you've either been ruminating about expanding your home or moving to a larger one. If you're considering expanding, do it. If you've considered moving, Osprey would say absolutely not, and to instead take a serious look at adding on, and maybe even taking on a boarder or two whom you know won't make you feel crowded or otherwise inconvenienced. Finally, ospreys are some of the most loving, attentive parents in the bird world. And parenting is a full-time job which simply cannot be performed by one bird alone. Each partner has their individual duties. Dad hunts and defends the nest, mom sits on the eggs. If dad is not there and mom leaves the eggs to defend the nest or hunt, they can become too cool and then not hatch, or a predator could break or steal them. Remember, she's got to fly all the way to the water and go fish. It's not like she can just grab something at the bottom of the tree. So this is a two-partner deal. When the chicks are old enough, both parents hunt, with one remaining with the children while the other's away. Osprey females have even been known to accompany their children on their first migration to show them the ropes, while osprey males stay with the chicks who aren't quite ready for migration, hunting with them or for them until they are. For this reason, if you've considered having children, Osprey is a big-time reminder that once you do so, life becomes all about the kiddos. And you and your partner had better have a clear idea of who's going to do what. It's very likely that one of you will work, one of you will stay home. Osprey also tends to be an affirmation if you've questioned your parenting abilities that you'll be an excellent one. However, if you don't want children, Osprey would tell you to make sure you are not leaving anything to chance as far as prevention goes, as the energies are right for the little ones to come into your life, and they will dramatically change your life. So I hope this has given you guys a good foundation for interpreting your Osprey experiences. Remember, if you're curious about the other animal videos that I've made, you can always go to my website, www.ravenlightholistichealing.com, for a complete, organized video library that's easily accessible. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Cheers!